I'm really pleased to welcome today Todd Rapp and Maureen from public radio as much as many other places. Both of these people have been involved in Minnesota politics for a long time and have done a great job of providing insights to the public on how things are going to shake out. They're probably going to have some really great opinions today, and I think they're going to provide us with something that we're really going to be able to go forward with into this election season. So I'll just turn it over to them, and I promise not to start a pledge card.
You'll have to tell me if I need this, or if it's not loud enough, I can pull it closer. Is that good? Yeah. Good morning. I'm Maureen Shaver, sometimes known as Mo, and Todd and I have worked together for many years. I typically have been active in Republican politics, and Todd has been active in DFL politics, and we like to tell the story that the only campaign that we know we've ever lost is the one we worked on together when Charlie Weaver ran for Attorney General, so we don't do that very much anymore. But I appreciate being asked to join you today. I'm going to start things off with just a quick overview. You all read the paper and see social media, so I'm sure you have a sense of what happened this session. But I'm just going to do a quick overview of what got done, what didn't get done, what may get done as we move potentially to a special session. And then Todd's going to, I'll move it over to Todd, and he'll do a presentation. There's nobody better in Minnesota politics doing analysis of what's happened and what might be coming down the road, and I think everybody in this room is probably a little more interested in the political climate and what it means. But Todd puts math to it, he puts facts to it, and I think it'll be useful as you make plans for the fall. So I'll start out, and then we'd be happy to take questions and answers, and frankly we'd like to leave a lot of time because that probably makes more sense to you. We prefer to structure the morning or the session around what you're interested in. So first of all, what got done? We got a tax bill and a supplemental bonding bill, or a supplemental budget bill with additional funding for E-12 education, including the governor's priority of $25 million for phased-in preschool, funding for higher ed, some economic development projects, sort of the secret siding project that will happen up on the Iron Range. Everybody's kind of waiting to see what that is. Health and Human Services funding, including resources for the state hospitals in St. Peter and Anoka, which was also a priority for Governor Dayton, which always has to be a priority for the governor. Others don't always make it such. And the judiciary. The legislature also appropriated $35 million for expanded access to broadband, and another $25 million, I believe, targeted for equity funding for racial disparities. We did some significant reform in drug sentencing guidelines, which I think the legislature passed fairly overwhelmingly. When we talk about not finding middle ground, this was one of the places they did, and I believe that'll have, not only is it good for our judicial system, but it'll have an impact on our prison population. We did pass a presidential primary. If you went to your caucus this year and were frustrated because either A, it took too long, or B, you didn't get to participate, next time in the presidential primary, we're going to look like a lot of the rest of the country. Ours has some uniqueness to it, and frankly, I haven't even spent a lot of time. Todd may be able to tell you more about that. In terms of how you'll participate, but I think it'll be a lot more satisfying for Minnesotans. And we also passed regulations for the use of body cameras by police. The governor has not signed all these bills yet. We expect that we may see some movement today on the tax bill, the supplemental bill, or for sure probably before the weekend. He'll give some indications, and my expectations is that he'll meet with legislative leadership over the week after the weekend, or will release perhaps his requests, demands, however you want to put it forward, for a potential special session to deal with both bonding and potentially transportation. So that leads to what didn't get done. Everybody said the linchpin to the session was a comprehensive transportation bill. That did not pass. A bonding bill, which probably you've seen a lot and may be the centerpiece of a special session, or it may not. We'll know more next week, I think. Legislation, unfortunately, authorizing real IDs, which frankly was one of the #1 issues that they heard from constituents, because people were afraid about how they were going to be able to either get on an airplane, or if you have someone in the military, get onto a military base and such, and we just couldn't come to agreement on that. The federal government gave us another year, so I think that took a little pressure off. but I'm sure you'll see that again next session. If you're interested in making sure that if you do fantasy sports leagues, they're legal in Minnesota, you have to wait another year. That didn't happen either. The political environment this session, it shouldn't surprise anyone that not everything got done. With the DFL controlling the governor's office and the Senate, Republicans controlling the House, finding that common ground on big policy and spending issues is really difficult and will mean that issues get left unresolved. But we did resolve issues in the tax and spending areas, and I think that that will be significant to many Minnesotans. But it is important to remember, how this play out, who is up this fall? Both the House and Senate. And Todd will tell you a little bit of information about the uniqueness of this year as it relates to the House and Senate being up in a presidential when we've never had another statewide office and what that will mean. I think both the DFL and GOP will take their message of tax relief for middle-class voters to this fall. You're going to hear a lot about middle-class tax relief. I think they're going to focus on historic budget of last year, actually. We're going to hear a lot of conversation about a record commitment to E12 funding and in higher ed, funds for nursing homes, and treating those with mental health problems. But we'll probably, in my mind, and we can get into this a little bit, have more impact on who's going to come back in charge will be the presidential election. So I'm going to hand it over to Todd and let him talk a little bit about the climate, and then we'll take some questions.
Thanks everybody for having me. I gotta say it's really a joy to be a political analyst when they give you a year like this. I gotta say. And
coming from the Democrat.
Yeah. This is not by the way, it's not what Maureen and I do. I mean, we got real jobs. We own real businesses and obviously provide advice to clients, but it's nice that as an avocation, people come and ask us to give speeches. We get a chance to be on NPR because it's years like this that you sit back and you cross your fingers that they happen. It's like a great pennant race in baseball. Only the entire future of the country, of course, is at risk here. I'd like to just walk through a few slides and talk to you a little bit about what's going on. I'm better standing, you know. I like being like this. So. I've been trying to find a way to describe what's going on here in terms of the campaign and Donald Trump. It's hard not to make this about anything other than Donald Trump because day after day after day he controls the news cycle completely. And it appears that they like it. What he's done is that he's brought this level of sarcasm and criticism that came out of David Letterman. He's combined it with a reality show mentality. And then he's actually added on to it the whole idea of Charles Carroll on the road. Trump lets you know a couple days beforehand, I'm coming to your town, and people get really excited. And that combination of the three, not surprisingly, has made CBS CEO Les Moonves say, it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say, but bring it on, Donald, keep it coming. I guess I'm not surprised by that quote. I'm a little bit discouraged by that quote, obviously, that that's what we've come down to right now in the news business. Donald Trump has increased the profits for cable TV and for the network TV news departments significantly. And that's one of the reasons they like seeing him, and frankly, he is playing to them, very much. People talk a lot about, I think, they shake their heads about Donald Trump and they can't believe that he's there. You can see where it comes from, though, if you dig a little bit deeper into what's been going on, both within the Republican Party and just generally in the mindset of America. So, let me talk about the nomination for the Republican Party just the last two times around when you got John McCain and Mitt Romney. You had about 20 million people show up, and each year there were about 12 active candidates. And basically the way it split out was about 60% of voters or caucus attendees were part of this old traditional economic freedom, national security, shaver mentality Republican, right? It's Bill Frenzel was a great example of this type of Republican. And then about 3% were really socially conservative. The typical Iowa caucus attendee, for example. And that split was always there, so Romney and McCain had some pressure from the right. They had to be careful on their positions. But by and large, the national security, economic freedom Republicans, what we call the establishment Republicans, would win. What happened this year? 10 million people, more people have turned out. And by the way, you only got to get to 62 or 63 million if you want to become president. And 30 million Republicans, by the time California is done, will have showed up for caucuses and primaries. That's 10 million more. We've had 17 active candidates. And the result of that has been the division between the economic freedom, national security Republicans and the socially conservative Republicans. They're not split almost 50-50 within their portion of the party, but there is this new 40% anti-establishment. Not all are true Republicans, as in, I'm aligned with the Republican Party always, but they voted in the Republican primary or caucuses as Donald Trump speaks for them, and they're mad. And who they're mad at? Everybody. They're mad at the Republican Party, they're mad at the Democratic Party. I remember sitting outside with a buddy of mine who's absolutely from this group. And I looked at him last July and said, Donald Trump? And he looked at me and said, I'm so tired of Mitch McConnell. He's tired of the Senate Majority Leader. And he just recently had won the Senate. And he was already sick of it. He says, he's as bad as Harry Reid. That's the mentality going on. And it represents about 40% of Republican voters in the caucus and primaries. But that's it. He's not wanting to use that at all. People have never complained. People have never complained that I don't speak loud enough. So, Trump's right now at 40.1% of the vote. He's only got a majority in a handful of states. But he's taken this group, brought new people in, and the other two groups just didn't have the strength or the wherewithal to work together enough to take over. Coming out of this cycle, more people, or almost as many people, will have voted for Donald Trump's Republican primary opponents that voted in the entire 2012 Republican process. That means two things. Number one is he has brought a lot of new people to the process. But it means number two, the folks out there who aren't sure about Trump, they largely represent who were the people who were showing up in 2008 and 2012. So, it's likely, although, the great thing about this campaign is it seems like every day or every other day, something really makes a change. And I think the email story that came out yesterday is a big deal. Having said that, Hillary Clinton is neither thought of as trustworthy or likable by most voters. So it does bring up that question, how untrustworthy, much more untrustworthy could she be? And it's really a comparison with Donald Trump when it comes right down to it. When you come down to two candidates, it's really how you compare to your opponent, not how you compare to a higher standard or the standard of the current president, what have you. And I still don't see a way that Bernie Sanders takes the nomination, even in the context of the latest email problem that she has. So if you compare the two candidates, you see a lot of minuses there in terms of what voters think of them. Trustworthiness, likability, in both cases they get minuses. Sincerity, I think they both get minuses, but Donald Trump has some reasons that he can convince people he's sincere. When it comes to temperament, fighting for the middle class, experience, those are areas that Hillary Clinton can build on. Independence, change, those are areas that Donald Trump can build on. But I'm not sure that's what Donald Trump's going to do. I think Trump has decided that the first way he can become president is to make Hillary Clinton more unfavorable than he is. And she has given a lot of ammunition for him to try to use. And that's what this first week of the general election campaign is about, is him trying to see if that strategy will work. He's got tons of time and he'll have the resources available if he needs to shift his strategy. But for right now, he wants to see if he can get her numbers lower and force her to play more defense than she's probably willing to play. Having said that, that's not a very friendly chart when it comes right down to it. So here's the status of a horse race. 4 polls came out over the weekend. Washington Post, ABC, New York Times, CBS, Wall Street Journal, NBC, Fox News. I hope you got somebody there you like to read or watch. They all got something. And they're all close. The biggest split is the New York Times, CBS News, but each one is 1-2. Typically, splits come because of different ways that people sample or how they decide who's a likely voter. The splits that are occurring in gender, in ethnicity, very typical for this time. Note that a good portion of the Obama voters are with Clinton. A good portion of the Romney voters are with Trump. Those who have a college degree tend to vote Democrat, those who have no degree tend to vote Republican. You know, it's pretty simple, folks. What's happened over the last few weeks is that this race has become a traditional Democrat versus Republican race. It's kind of the same position that Obama and McCain were in. A little bit closer than maybe Obama and Romney, because Obama was an incumbent. We're kind of starting from there. Race is resettled, and now people are going to start to figure out, okay, where do I want to go? And the two key questions are going to be where independents go, and will the base turn out? And by the way, those are the key questions any election. It just happens this year's a little bit more volatile. Maybe that's an understatement. It's a lot more volatile. One of the reasons why it's so volatile is in a Clinton-Trump general election. We'll take a poll from ABC Washington Post. 46 for Trump, 44 for Clinton. 44% of the Trump voters are pro-Trump, 53% anti-Clinton. Similarly, about a 50-50 split between Clinton and Trump. Only 41% of voters are going to be voting for a candidate if that election were held today. Almost 60% are voting against somebody. You want to know why the messages are so negative. You want to know why Donald Trump is going after Clinton so hard. You want to know why Debbie Wasserman Schultz, DNC chair, doesn't care if she loses her job. She's going to go after him. And other U.S. senators are going to go after Donald Trump. That's the reason why. They're really focused on solidifying that 60%. Because they're scared to death that 41% is going to get lower than it is right now. Now, having said all of that, it's really easy to sit back in my elitist chair next to my friend Maureen and say, Clinton can't lose this thing. She can't. Donald Trump can win. Here's some of the reasons why. Right direction in this country is at 30%. The rest think it's going the wrong track. Congressional approval is at 14%. Dissatisfaction or anger with Washington, 76%. Are you less enthusiastic than past elections? 40%. That's going to hurt Democrats more than Republicans. Am I getting ahead financially? Only 23%. Folks, those are some numbers that cry out for somebody like a Donald Trump to stand up and say, you need real change, folks. And if you look at Hillary Clinton, if what you are right now is anti-Washington, Hillary Clinton doesn't have a very good story to tell about being an outsider. She's been in Washington now basically since 1993. First Lady, U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, and now is a candidate for president. So, if you look at the map going forward, it looks a lot like it's looked for the last several years, but with two exceptions. And what you see here is kind of the tannish yellow. Those are the states that are really most in play, or the white are most in play, any of those. There's two new states on that list that haven't been there for a long time. Michigan and Pennsylvania. For very different reasons. Michigan, very heavily blue-collar, anti-establishment vote. For those of you who are as old as Brad and me, you remember George Wallace in 1968, South and segregationist, he won the Michigan primary, thanks to the support of the United Auto Workers. Okay? Michigan is the kind of state that the Donald Trump campaign can really appeal to a lot of those voters. Pennsylvania is also in play because it's been trending more red over the last several years. And with those two states in play, all of a sudden a fairly narrow Clinton lead exists. But you got to get out there, you got to figure out a way to win Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan at minimum, or win 3 of the 4 and then take some of the other states. So can Trump do it? I don't know. I listed here what's happened over the last 4 presidential races, and in the far left column where the polls are, but the polls are changing all the time. Important thing here is that in almost every one of those states I've listed, a Republican has won at least once over the last 4 elections, and in the case of Pennsylvania, it's beginning a lot closer than I think is comfortable for the Democratic Party. So, what does all this mean in terms of Minnesota? In 1972, which by the way, I think, Brad, you were 10 years into already helping these fine school districts right by the capital. 10 years already in lobbies. So, in 1972, the state of Minnesota decided that partisan elections should be extended to the legislature. Before then, it did not say DFL or Republican on the ballot. Since then, there has been no election where the presidency has been open, or there has been no statewide race and where all 201 legislators are up for election with divided government. Okay, that seems all volatile, a lot of qualifiers, but think about it for a second. No incumbent U.S. president, that affects resources. No statewide campaign, that affects messaging. 201 legislators up, we're going to talk about the legislature everywhere in double doses. Divided government, no clear message coming out of the Capitol. This is a year for a focus on the legislature, and not just their accomplishments, but their process, how they do things. And we were on NPR Monday, and one of the things we said was, you got to mind your P's and Q's, legislators, because you might go back and find those Trump and Sanders voters are as mad at you as they are at Washington. Okay? Things are going pretty well in Minnesota. Economy's going well, most people are confident in the direction. But if the governor continues to beat up on these guys for not getting the job done, there's going to be some districts in the state where, do you trust the legislature to meet the needs of Minnesota, or is going to be a key question. And of course, in some cases it'll be Republicans on the defensive, and in some cases it'll be Democrats on the defensive about that. Another thing to understand is the voter turnout is not consistent in Minnesota. From year to year, it goes up and down, largely between whether it's a non-presidential or presidential year. In non-presidential years, it's usually less than 2 million. In presidential years, it's pushing 3 million, and it may exceed 3 million this year unless base turnout drops because of these two candidates. It's a big difference, and one of the biggest reasons for the gap, younger voters and lean DFL voters. So Democrats tend to like years like this. The state Senate has never lost, the Democratic state Senate majority has never lost their majority in a presidential year, for example. And this is going to be a big factor. The difference between 3 million and 2.6 million votes is really the difference between Democrats having comfortable years and Democrats having years that they're more difficult. Now, final thing I want to show you is Minnesota is really split into 4 different states over the last several election cycles. You've got a core, and I'm using House figures here. You've got a core group in the Twin Cities, 494, 694 Beltway districts that touch that. The Democrats in the House completely dominate. And then you got the ring of suburbs around that, which are completely controlled by Republicans. Then you got these areas of outstate, where I don't think you can see that, but it says Republican 43, Democrat 9. These areas of outstate, they've really consolidated their control of these areas. Although you've got these towns, these little blue dots there, particularly where college campuses are, the Democrats can still control. And then you got Northeast, which is completely controlled by the Democratic Party. You look at that though, and you can see really, where's the fight going to be? It's going to be at the edges. The Republicans and Democrats will fight over the districts where they converge here between blue and red. Or they'll fight in some of the areas of convergence there or there. Or Republicans may try to grab a couple of college towns and win those. But this difference is really stark. It's a different map than we saw 10 years ago in Minnesota. The consolidation of where the parties are the strongest. And then if you overlay that with the congressional districts, you see some really interesting things, such as the Colin Peterson and Tim Walz. The Democratic Party should thank their lucky stars those 2 guys are still running, because those are now Republican districts. Where the Northeast Minnesota, you want to watch on Election Day where the Rick Nolan wins, it's pretty simple. If he wins St. Louis County by 25,000 votes, he's going to win re-election. If he wins St. Louis County by 15,000 votes, we're going to be uphill one. If he wins it by 5,000 votes, he's not going to win the election. St. Louis County has become that important to the 8th district. And you see here that there's really only 3 truly safe districts anymore in the state. The 4th and the 5th in the core of the metro, and the 6th district, the Amber district. All of the rest have the possibility of flipping to one party or another, given the politics, if you look at a map like this. So, that's kind of my story as to what's going on in terms of the election this year. Hang on, folks. It's going to be something, particularly if you like watching your local legislators sweat just a little bit more than they normally do. Honestly, this is going to be the year for that. There's a big movement out there of voters who have been supporting Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump that I think are willing to speak out in this election. And in Minnesota, the only place to speak out is going to be legislative races. So, Bo, anything else on that one?
Just a couple quick as always, facts are stubborn things, and Todd always brings that to the debate. So when, your neighbor pretends like they know everything, now you're going to be a lot smarter, and you can bring reality to the situation. I think I'm in agreement on voter turnout. I actually think that one of the things we're going to watch is when you have a typically very, very negative campaign, sometimes that just dampens voter turnout. People just say sort of a pox on all your houses. Especially here in Minnesota, ironically, we are just that standard. We voted for Bernie Sanders and Marco Rubio. Donald Trump came in third here in Minnesota. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that base vote does, as Todd talked about. I think there are a couple hidden issues. I think we're going to see the economy, and again, not so much here in Minnesota, but what it's going to do in those targeted electoral states around the country that Todd talked about. The economy always has an enormous impact, and we're still a couple months from people weighing in on how that's going to affect the election. I think President Obama, ironically, he has his approval ratings are rising right now. I think he's going to actually be able to be more effective on the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton than you sometimes bring in an incumbent president. And I think he's going to want to protect his legacy. He was pretty outspoken yesterday in talking about how he thought the leaders around the world were watching this race, and I don't think he's going to mince any words. The gender gap is real. It's very real. And women in this country vote more than men do, and they're going to have a lot to say about who our next president is. And finally, on that one, I think Todd's analysis on the 4 Minnesotans, for people who are watching what happens at the legislature, and it's very important to your organization, people looked at the last election and said, well, how did Mark Dayton win? And won convincingly, not overwhelmingly, but convincingly. It wasn't as close as his first election. How did he win, and how did the House flip? And it was those 4 Minnesotas that Todd's talking about. That's the same sort of thing if somebody says, well, how do the Republicans stay in the House, or how do they take over the Senate, is that those votes are consolidated, though, in already Democrat districts. So that those Twin Cities seats and the Northeast part of the state, that's not where the movement will be in these legislative elections. And the retirements this year, I would not have said, please don't tell Senator Bach, because I'll hear about it. But I would not have said, I would not have said a year ago that the Senate was in play as much as I feel it could be today, but that's primarily because they had some key retirements, and they're going to make a difference. And frankly, Senator Bonhoff, in the recent one, again, puts a seat in play that was not in play just 2 months ago. So, he's going to do everything to defend that, and it's his first time, and he's aware, as everybody is, that the Democrats have never lost the Senate since partisan times when there's a presidential, but he was not helped by some of the retirements. So I don't know. Do you want to? That's my response.
Let's answer questions.
Yep.
That'd be more fun. So, go ahead.
Question? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering what you think the impact of the debates will be on the national stage. Once Trump and Clinton actually get on the debate, what has been the history of momentum development for the candidate? What do you see how that playing out?
Well, Donald Trump has already established that the rule this year is that you don't have to act presidential, okay? It's for years it's been the case of, think about McCain versus Obama. Obama needed to prove he was presidential, okay? And that was his goal. I don't think that's a decision rule in any way this year. So I think that what's going to be necessary in the debates is going to depend somewhat on the evolution of the campaign. But I'm fairly confident one of 2 things is true. Either the debates will be fully about 2 candidates appealing to their bases to get them to turn out and vote, or they will be fighting for a slice of about 4 million independents, 1 million of whom live in 5 or 6 key states that will decide the Electoral College. And you're going to be able to tell right away from how a debate tone begins which they're trying to do. Get the base to turn out or persuade independents. And they'll know from that very detailed polling. And we should point out that Donald Trump has finally caved in. got Tony Fabrizio,
Yeah.
who is as good a pollster as there is on the Republican side of the country. Used to do Tim Pawlenty's work, and he's fabulous. And Trump is going to understand that stuff going to debates. So.
Just a quick note on Tony Fabrizio. He did Governor Pawlenty's, both of his two campaigns, and he's tough. And we would all love to be a little fly on the wall in a room with Donald Trump and Tony Fabrizio, that I can guarantee you. I think it's a great question, because I think the country is going to be tuned in a way we've never seen. I mean, look what they watched all these debates, Democrat and Republican, as they went throughout the process here. I think Todd is absolutely right, but then you're also going to have the pollster in the room, and then you're going to have the strategist, and then God forbid you have the candidate. And what's going to happen is the pollster is going to say, here's clearly what the numbers say to do for these 5 states. Go after the independents, or prove that I have enough experience, or that the anti-establishment, whatever the poll's going to say. And then the strategists are going to get nervous, because that is not going to be a traditional way to run a debate. A debate has got, 4 days of prep, somebody pretending to be the opposite person, back and forth. And that strategist is going to be very nervous. And then the candidate, and it's going to happen with both of them. Hillary Clinton is going to say, I am finally going to make these people like me and know that I have experience to do this job. And Donald Trump is going to go in there and say, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. And it's going to be a nightmare. I don't know. I mean, Todd and I have we've done debate preps. We've fought with pollsters. We've fought with candidates, trust me. And it is going to be a fascinating experience, because who will be more disciplined about what they need to do on those? Will it be 3 probably, you think? Well, it'll be 2 presidential and vice presidential, perhaps, maybe even 3. I don't know if they've set up, to be honest. No. But even who knows if they'll get through the debate negotiations. Right. That'll be interesting. So it is going to be, there's going to be a traditional way to handle it, and then I think these 2 candidates are going to have a lot to say that actual night about how it goes.
Just to build off that question, this morning there was discussions about Bernie Sanders and Trump having a debate prior to the California primary. And they said, bring it on. Sanders said, bring it on. Trump said, great, let's do it. Yeah. How do you think that might throw this into a whole new world here?
It ain't good, that's for sure. It's interesting, Bernie Sanders is such an interesting character. He only became a member of the Democratic Party in recent years. Before then he was running as an independent or independent socialist. He rails on about superdelegates. He is a superdelegate. Hillary Clinton is not. The irony is there. Donald Trump has every reason to get into debate with Bernie Sanders, and if he did, he will spend most of the debate saying either Bernie is right or Bernie, that's a really good idea. I don't know why Hillary Clinton isn't listening to you here. And that's what the debate will end up being about, is a big commercial about a rigged system, which is really not rigged in any way, but that both of them want to claim is, and both of them want to be anti-establishment. It would be a remarkably dangerous thing to have happen, which given this year means it's probably 80% probability that will occur.
It would be a nightmare. I had not heard that, and so this morning I can guarantee you that the Clinton campaign has not had a good week, between yesterday's email and now having to deal with the fact that their opponent may be considering this, because all it does is point out the flaws in Hillary Clinton, and it will give Donald Trump something that makes him look more official. And the idea that he, of course, is a candidate before she is, in the Democratic Party, is just all a mess. But it could, the one thing, as longtime people have been involved in the process, I am very discouraged, though, that both my sons will vote for the first time for president this year. And they're pretty engaged. One will probably vote for Bernie Sanders. I don't know, my other son was in the Marine Corps, and he probably, though, isn't going to stick with, for sure won't be voting for Donald Trump. But what I fear is that that the conversation isn't going to be about the economy and what's happening in the Middle East, and whether or not we're taking care of veterans, or what's happening with Social Security. And so I'm very worried about the tenor of that campaign. So if something like that happens, I think it's just gonna be the food fight, unless Moonves is only gonna be more excited, because the cable networks and others will be making more money.
More questions?
Joel?
Going back to your last slide with the four Minnesota's overlaid with the congressional districts, what's your thoughts on the second?
The second, everybody's jumped in right away and said right away, the second is leaning Democrat. Folks, it's not. And the second is leaning Republican still. I mean, there's a nice little portion in the northern part that's Democrat, absolutely. But overall, it still is a race for that Republicans to lose. Doesn't mean Democrats can't capture it. Democrats got a good candidate who's well-funded. Republicans went outside the district, which is generally not a bad thing, and they grabbed Jason Lewis, which could be a bad thing, except in a Donald Trump year. Lewis is not going to look like the craziest candidate on the ballot. I don't care how much of his stuff you go back and get. He's going to fit right in with Trump. I think the other thing about this race is that unlike the 3rd district, Eric Paulson's district, where I think there are some legitimate concerns that Terry Bonoff can run a very credible campaign in some of those suburbs. There's a lot of areas in the 2nd district that Democrats have not won for many years. We're talking about a decade. And who are not going to, whereas some of the south and western suburbs may say, I'll pick Clinton over Trump even though I'm a moderate Republican, but I just can't stand Trump. I don't think in Dakota County they're going to have that much of a problem with Donald Trump and his positions. So then you go over and you go a little bit farther to the west, and there's some very Republican areas. It may be a toss-up, but if I was running the election for the Democrats in the 2nd district, I would operate the entire campaign like we're 6 points down. Because I think that's a very much a possibility that's where the election would turn out.
I think that it's a toss-up. It has to be. It's an incumbent, Republican incumbent retiring after many years, and the Democrats are running in a presidential year. That's the best time to run a Democrat for a swing congressional seat. It's also going to, it probably would be one of the top 5 campaigns what money is spent this election nationwide, because it is in the toss-up calendar. So we are going to see millions of dollars spent in that race. We're going to see the same for the 3rd district. I think Eric Paulson fits that district perfectly. I think Senator Bonoff got into that race very late if she was going to have an opportunity. And because he sits on the Ways and Means Committee, and because he has passed, Representative Paulson passed the repeal of the medical device tax, he just is going to have a lot of people that want to help him get reelected. But the interesting thing is, for the legislature, is there will be, even though we don't have a statewide race, there's going to be a lot of money spent in those 2 congressional districts that will drive turnout. And that's actually good for all those legislative seats that are up.
Talk to me about where you think the millennials that are currently with Sanders are going to go, especially if they do have that debate between Trump and Sanders this year. Will those millennials choose to go away from Clinton and land in the Trump camp? And do you think that will be probably the highest focus of Trump as he goes into that debate?
I'm going to go first because he's going to bring the facts to this matter, and I'm just going to bring a little opinion. So I think Todd, I think we don't know anecdotally where the millennials go, and I think that Todd probably has a little more fact-based polling to tell you where they may head.
Maybe. First of all, look at the appetite we have for Trump and Sanders. Isn't that amazing that if you start thinking about it, you go, wow, can you imagine if that happened and how interesting that would be? Experienced people who follow politics look at that and go, that could be really interesting. Millennials, they're not committed to a party. They're committed to an individual. Much of this election for people over the age of 40 will be party-driven, and you hold your nose, okay? For millennials, for many, it's their first opportunity in the post-Obama era, obviously, to think about this, or it's their first opportunity, period, to vote. So, assuming that just because Bernie Sanders eventually says, you know what, I'm okay, I'm going to support Hillary because she's better than Trump, they're gonna look at that and go, boy, I'm not sure. And they're gonna get online and they're gonna start looking at, is it Gary Johnson?
Yep.
Our friend from the Libertarian Party. And that could be one of the strongest forces that keeps Trump active in some states that you wouldn't normally expect him to be active in, is because Johnson is pulling Sanders millennials, and it's affecting the Hillary Clinton coalition. So there's my prediction. Come back to me in mid-November and tell me if I was right or wrong. I'll forget I said that. But I think if I was to look forward and I think about what I've seen in the polling, that's the risk there for Clinton. Because they're going to vote, by the way. They're going to vote.
Any other questions? Or?
Time for one more, I think.
Well, I've got one.
Ooh. And I picked her anyway. I shouldn't have done.
Has Stuart Mill's haircut helped or hurt you?
Maureen should take this one.
Help, and I think that's going to be a very interesting race.
I can't believe how different he looks. I mean, but remember, again, the 8th district on election night, look at St. Louis County. Jim Oberstar lost because he only won St. Louis County by 12,000 votes. That's really, if no one can keep that 25,000 margin, there's just not enough votes in the rest of the district for Mills to win.
The polls obviously have not been quite predictive in some of the primaries and the caucuses. How do the millennials and their lack of traditional landline polling kinds of phone numbers, how does that impact the data? And do you think that, because I think it's going to be decided by the people who the pollsters have no idea about?
What an awesome question. Because somebody, can I?
And
You
he
might
does
be
this for a
jumping
living, so I'm just going to sit back and listen.
First of all, most pollsters don't know how to do primary or caucus states because you got to read the rules. You got to figure out if independents are able to attend. And you go back to Michigan and Sanders' upset win, it's not that much of an upset if you look at the exit polls, if they had polled right from the beginning. Secondly, big problem for polls is that they try to do them too quick. They try to do them in 1 or 2 nights, and they end up getting more women than men and more older people than younger people, and so what they do is they reweight. And so what they do is 70% women, 30% men. Okay, we'll just adjust the figures to make it 50-50. And we have too many older people, so we'll just adjust the figures. Well, the result of that is, folks, eventually the suit doesn't fit, okay, when you do that many adjustments to it. You just got to go out and buy a new one. And I do a lot of polling for clients, and I tend to really focus on those who actively manage the sample as opposed to using reweighting. Now you add to that the difficulty of getting a hold of millennials. And if a pollster does not say, we set appointments to do our surveys with cell phone only households, if you don't see that kind of language, be a little bit distrustful of it because they're not bringing in the millennials. What you've got to be able to do is get somebody on the phone and say, can I talk to you later? Can I talk when you're ready? And you got to get home by cell phone. In Minnesota right now, I basically demand at least 30% of the sample is cell phone only. And there will be pollsters who don't do that very well, or as they do it, they'll use that reweighting process.
And they literally set up appointments to do this?
We literally set up appointments. So, great question, and you're right to be skeptical. Look very carefully at the methodology of these polls. That's why any of these right now, they say the race is going to be close. Well, duh, it is going to be relatively close. So they, other than that, I'm not sure where it is.
Just a short question. What happens if you're running a local election like a levy or referendum or bond? What does that crystal ball that you have, both of you, say about that?
It's gonna.
And you picked a November date?
Well, we have.
Okay.
High turnout affects all those things. You just gotta get your message out to more people. And I think statistically, Todd can tell you it's harder.
I assume you say you have to, it's an operator? Yeah. Presidential years are not as bad, obviously as off years are for passing. I think the bigger concern is that there will be a pretty strong anti-tax mood set at the top. and in the key congressional races. And you're gonna have to manage that. And I mean, I go back to what I tell, those chances I have to work with school districts and talk about polling, it really comes down to how you are on two questions. Number one is, do they have confidence in the quality of education in your district? And number two is, do they have confidence that the administration or the board manages financial decisions well? And if your numbers on both of those are pretty good, you've at least got the foundation to have a good discussion about value. But if both those numbers aren't good, this is going to be, I think, a tough year to go out and to make that case. And so, look, if the firm you work with doesn't ask those two questions, and I'm a little biased, I work a lot with Morris Leatherman on my statewide polls, and I know they always ask those. But the firm you work with doesn't do those two, make sure they have those two there, and you look really carefully at those voters.
All right. I want to thank both Maureen and Todd for coming out today, really providing kind of an outline of the environment we'll be working in as we look at next year's legislative session and the folks that will be populating those seats. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Say thanks to Todd and Maureen. It's a very interesting conversation. It's a sustaining member myself. I've always find it very interesting listening to the analysts on NPR, and nice to put a face to voices.